Hey NLC, so today we are entering into the second day of Holy Week following Palm Sunday. Christian tradition has called this day Holy Monday. It's in the week that's leading up to Easter, as you know, and a few things happened on this day that leads up to Easter as Jesus was living out what he knew was going to be the final days of his life before his death and resurrection. So after Palm Sunday and Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, Jesus returns back to the outskirts of Jerusalem for the night. And then in Matthew chapter 21, it tells us that the next day, on his way back into Jerusalem, he sees this fig tree and it's not producing any figs, so he curses the tree and it dies. And so then Jesus comes into Jerusalem and he heads to the temple courts, and upon reaching the temple courts, he was challenged by the religious leadership on what authority he was teaching and doing miracles and all these things. And he responds to them, and then, according to the book of Mark, Jesus begins clearing out the temple. He starts to clear out all the money changers and the people that are selling animals for sacrifices. And in Mark chapter 11, it says that Jesus told them, the Bible declares, the scriptures declare, my temple is to be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. And so what was the source of Jesus' anger here? We usually see this portrait of Jesus as being kind of a passive guy, really gentle and meek. And suddenly there's this outburst of emotion, anger even. Jesus is flipping over tables and blocking exits. In the book of John, it says that he even made a whip and was using a whip. Well, Jesus' outburst was more than just a temple tantrum, as it were. You see, here's the situation. These animal salesmen and the money changers that were there weren't just there out of the goodness of their own hearts. They weren't just there to help you make sacrifices, to help you in your relationship with God. You see, these people were extortionists. They were charlatans. They were there because they knew that this high holiday of Passover was coming, and it would bring a massive influx of worshipers into Jerusalem. There are estimates that there were multiple times the population of Jerusalem that would show up just for this event. And so many pilgrimages were from so distant a land that bringing a sacrificial animal along with you was really impractical, if not impossible. And so they would buy the animal there at the temple. And so seeing this high demand come and the temple being filled with people, these people had this idea, and so they began charging exorbitant prices for sacrifices. Sacrifices that were meant to bring reconciliation to God and relationship with God were now being charged these wildly high prices. And as a matter of fact, according to Jewish history, Rabbi son of Gamaliel finally at one point made this new ruling, this law that required the reduction in price of doves by 99%. That means these sacrificial animals were being charged prices that were many, multiple times what they are actually worth in order to make massive profits for these people. In the same way, the temple tax would be only received in a certain type of money. It was a type of money called a Tyrian shekel. So if you tried to pay with any other denomination of money, it could be Roman coins, Greek coins, anything else, it would have to be converted over into this Tyrian shekel. And as you guessed it, the conversion rate was massive. It was a massive overcharge. There's other historical information that suggests that wealthy elites in the city would use the temple as a base of operation to charge exorbitantly high interest rate loans to people to exploit the poor. Basically, they were loan sharking right there in the temple, and people who were at risk of losing their land, widows, would be caught up in this loan sharking. And so Jesus' anger, when he's in the temple clearing it out, was not in that the animals were being supplied for sacrifice, but rather he was angry that anyone or anything would be put in place to obstruct with people and reconciliation with God, between people and relationship with God. And so throughout history, we see this over and over again, where people have tried to put contingencies and rules around access to God. The Reformation that occurred, which was the movement that brought about Protestantism and ultimately our Pentecostal movement, it came out of response to what was going on in the Catholic Church. You see, the Catholic Church, in large part, was preventing people from having an opportunity of having a personal relationship with Jesus. Liturgies, which are church services, and scripture were all being done in languages that were not familiar to the average person. They were being done in Latin and in other languages, and people didn't even know what was being spoken to them. And so Martin Luther and the Reformationists began to see these things that were being done that were so wrong. Another thing that was happening were indulgences were being sold as a means to absolve your sin or the sin of a loved one you cared about. And so if you wanted forgiveness, you could buy with money forgiveness from God. And so the Reformationists and Martin Luther saw this, and this is part of the reason he wrote up the 99 Theses that we heard about, where he tacked it to the church door. And so he saw, once again, humanity trying to put in these walls and these barriers between us and God, things that we construct ourselves. And so this is why we celebrate Easter. We celebrate Easter because Jesus, the hero of heaven, came down and he died so that we don't have to depend on the blood of an offering or to pay off some individual or person that can give us access to God. Jesus is the single payer option for us. Jesus is the single payer option, and this is such a good thing. You see, Jesus told us that no one comes to the Father except through him. And so I encourage you and I challenge you, don't buy into anything that would tell you otherwise. It's just not worth the price.